And welcome back. Thanks very much for staying on with us here on WION World is One. My name is Molly Gambhir. Election season underway. Over the next 30 minutes, we are taking you through the key electoral contest lined up over the next few days and weeks and the key issues at play. We are starting off with the UK, where the countdown is on for the first significant electoral test for the British Prime Minister Boris Johnson since the Partygate allegations engulfed Downing Street. Local elections on the 5th of May are the last major polls before general elections expected to take place in 2024. All the councils in Scotland and Wales are being contested. In Scotland, 1,200 seats are up for grabs in 32 council areas. In Wales, 1,200 across 22 councils, and in England, more than 4,000 council seats are being contested across 146 councils. Now, these elections could not have come at a worse time for the Tories. According to the latest projection, the Conservative Party could lose up to 550 seats. If the opinion polls turn out to be true, this would be the worst local election performance for the party in a generation. With the Partygate scandal, Boris Johnson's reputation hit rock bottom. He was even fined by the police for breaching his own COVID-19 rules during the 2020 lockdown. Also haunting Boris Johnson is the prospect that he will be found to have misled the parliament when, in response to allegations over the Downing Street gatherings, he told the lawmakers that rules were followed at all times. According to ministerial code, such an eventuality would normally lead to resignation. Though the Prime Minister has apologized in the House of Commons twice, he has repeatedly dodged questions about his future. Now, he claims that the people want the country's politicians to get on with running the country and not obsess over events that took place 2 years ago. The local elections will certainly be an indicator of whether or not Boris Johnson's claims have been right. Johnson and his ministers have been surrounded by scandals and multiple crises. Members of the Tories have publicly called for the Prime Minister's resignation as well. Let's take a look at the latest Ipsos survey. It reveals, though despite the massive political damage done to Johnson and his cabinet, the lockdown parties are taking a back seat in the minds of the voters, at least for the local elections. A cost of living crisis linked to Brexit is what Johnson's fate could depend on. Inflation in the UK is at a 30-year high. The opposition has accused the Prime Minister of having no serious response to this and no clear strategy. Boris Johnson has been grappling with scandals and controversies, a series of them, but remains an exceptional politician. He has been able to weather storms that might have sunk his predecessors. Johnson was also spared a no-confidence vote in party because his fellow Tories consider him a proven vote-getter. Also, there is no obvious successor waiting in the wings. Remember, despite his conservative credentials, Johnson was twice elected as mayor of the left-leaning London under him. Brexit achieved a surprise referendum victory as well. And with Johnson as their leader, the Tories won a landslide victory in 2019 and got a historic 80-seat majority in the House of Commons. So ahead of the local elections, Johnson has been out on the campaign trail. He has been hitting up market towns in the north of England and many television studios in the south as well. He also addressed the Ukrainian parliament this week, where he was cheered with multiple standing ovations.
I have one message for you. Believe it.
Many see Johnson's response to the Ukraine war as an attempt to be hailed as a global hero. This as his ratings back home continue to fall. Analysts say the main opposition, the Labour Party, is on course to become the biggest winner from the anticipated drop in support for the Prime Minister's Conservatives. Conservatives are trailing Labour by about 5 to 8 percentage points. Voters in England, Scotland and Wales have several issues on their minds. The cost of living crisis, the government's response to COVID-19, the Partygate scandal. Now, whether some of them or all of them will become crucial factors for a part referendum on Boris Johnson and the Tories overall remains to be seen. With us on the broadcast this minute is Mohammad Shafiq, broadcaster and television presenter, joining us live from Manchester. Thanks very much for being here with us. These might be local polls, but they're being seen as a referendum, the last major elections before the general election slated for 2024. If you can take us through to what extent the Partygate scandal will be dominating the list of issues at hand. The cost of living crisis is the other major factor that could sway the voters on either side.
Yeah, it's an extraordinary election because Boris Johnson has had to face multiple challenges from getting elected in 2019 and a promise to get Brexit done. He got Brexit done. And then we had the pandemic. And then obviously recently we've had the illegal war and aggression, military aggression in Ukraine. However, the Partygate is something which is playing up on the doorstep time and time again. If you listen to the pollsters, if you listen to the commentators, and if you listen to the Conservative Party's own candidates, Partygate is coming up again. You'll recall, as it was across the world, lockdowns and the people who made the rules have to obey the rules. And that will be a deciding factor, I think, with voters who support the Conservative Party and whether they're going to switch to the Labour Party or the other opposition parties, or actually not vote at all and stay at home. The polls are suggesting that the Labour Party on a good night will probably take around 100 plus seats, with the Conservatives losing up to 600. And depending on what happens in some of those London boroughs like Wandsworth and Westminster, it's a real chance it could be a bloodbath for the Conservative Party. And that rests, if you like, with what's happening in Downing Street. You alluded to it earlier, Molly, around Boris Johnson and the Conservative Party not actually having a successor. Rishi Sunak, who is the Chancellor, obviously his stock has fallen in the last few weeks due to his wife's non-dom status. So actually there isn't anybody behind the scenes who could take it up. And that gives him a bit of a breathing space. But I think these elections will determine what happens after in terms of what the Conservative Party will do. Because one final thing, Molly, is that the Conservative Party have always been ruthless when it comes to removing their leaders if they cost them votes. And this election will be a barometer of indication as to if that is going to be a success.
Right. Will Boris Johnson's attempts to play peacemaker as far as the Ukraine war is concerned have any impact on his prospects, according to you?
I think on foreign policy and on Ukraine, there's lots of support across the country. The government's been commended, as has the opposition. There's a pretty unified position here in the UK in support of Ukraine and speaking up and standing up against Russia. There is concern around the Ukrainian refugees and their visa process being delayed. But I think on the whole, people will, credit Boris Johnson and his leadership on this particular issue. But the problem is people are looking at their pay packets. They are looking at the cost of living, prices going up, inflation is the highest it's been for 30 years, and looking to the government for action. And so far that hasn't happened. If I could just talk a bit about the opposition, the Labour Party, which is, as you said, 5 to 8% ahead of the polls, hasn't articulated what their strategy would be if they were to win the next election. And I think they need to put some meat on the bone around that. And also what they need to do is be clear about the fallout from Partygate and the questions around Keir Starmer and the allegations that he himself was in a meeting with over 30 people in Durham. So there's lots of questions in the newspapers around that as well today.
We're leaving it there for the moment. Thanks very much for being here on WION World is One and sharing those perspectives.
Thank you, Molly.
WION now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.